Now, Donald Trump still believes that he won the popular vote, despite, of course, no evidence found of voter fraud. Now, and of course, the sheer unlikeliness of that massive amount of voter fraud actually happening on such a wide scale. So why does he still believe this? Well, part of it's down to his ego, of course. He can't admit that he's a loser. No, of course I can't. I don't lose at anything. I couldn't have possibly lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton. No way, no way, no way. I won. I'm a winner. I'm not a loser. Okay, well, the other part has to do with the people that enable him and where he gets his information. And this comes from his so-called voter fraud expert, a man named Gregg Phillips. Now, Phillips, of course, claims without any proof that the election was tilted in favor of Hillary Clinton through the voting of 3 million undocumented immigrants. So they bust these people in there, he says, and they go and they vote in L.A. and California. Or, I'm sorry, California and New York. That's funny. If they were going to do widespread systematic voter fraud, couldn't they have at least done it in the states that actually might have mattered? Like, I don't know. I can't imagine them sitting there and saying, I mean, with all these political operatives and all this money and all this enormous staff, them sitting around and saying, I know, let's do voter fraud in California and New York, which we're going to win anyway. Because Democrats pretty much always win in New York and California. Let's forget about Michigan. Let's forget about Pennsylvania. Let's forget about Ohio and Wisconsin. Those states don't matter, even though they're incredibly important swing states when it comes to the Electoral College. No, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's ignore them. Said no political strategist ever. No one with a brain. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. But again, the president believes him and continues to tweet him out. See, look, because of this guy's so-called reports about this voter fraud, Trump says, well, we're going to go after that voter fraud. We're going to go after the dead people voting. We're going to go after people who are registered in 2 different states. And we're going to go after dead people, undocumented immigrants, coming in and voting. We're going to get rid of all that. We're going to investigate. Okay? Massive, massive investigation. Well, what's funny is that Trump's so-called voting expert, according to Trump's own criteria for voter fraud, would also have been considered to have done voter fraud. You see, Gregg Phillips is registered to vote in 3 different states. Uh-oh. Now, this is according to voting records and election officials in those states obtained by Law News. Now, Phillips is listed on the rolls in Alabama, Texas, and Mississippi. Oops. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, man. Now, look, to give you the level of hypocrisy here, there was a post earlier this month wherein Phillips described an amazing effort by volunteers tied to True the Vote. Now, True the Vote is, of course, an organization which looks at voter fraud, and he's also sitting on the board of True the Vote. And look, this group said that they had found thousands of duplicate records of registrations and registrations of people who are dead. Okay, well, duplicate records. People who are essentially registered in 2 different states. And then, of course, dead people. Well, look, people die. That's obvious. And they stay on the rolls. That's why you, at times, have voter purges. Now, some people freak out about voter purges, but they're actually there, or at least they were actually designed to go and say, okay, well, look, Joe Smith is dead. He passed away last year, so I'm going to have to purge him from the rolls to keep our rolls nice and clean and neat and tidy and in order. And, oh, look, Bob Smith, he moved away. He moved to another state. He's registered in the state. Okay, well, we'll purge him from the roll as well. But so being on on the voter registration in 2 different states, well, it doesn't mean you're voting in 2 different states. It just means you're on the voter roll. That's it. So there's nothing really illegal about that. Now, the AP found that Phillips was registered in Alabama and Texas under the name Gregg Allen Phillips, with the identical Social Security number. Mississippi records list him under the name of Gregg A. Phillips, and that record includes the final 4 digits of Phillips' social security number, his correct date of birth, and a prior address matching one once attached to Gregg Allen Phillips. He has lived in all 3 states. Now, look, there's nothing illegal about what this guy's done. Nothing. He is perfectly fine. But again, the hypocrisy comes into play of where he's essentially saying to Donald Trump, go after people who are registered in multiple states. Oops. Now, reached by telephone, Phillips said he was unaware of his multiple registrations, but then asked, quote, why would I know or care? Well, that's kind of an important question, especially since you recently said, oh, we found so many people, True the Vote found so many people that are registered twice. We got to get rid of them. Now, in response to this, he says, doesn't that just demonstrate how broken the system is? That is not fraud, which is correct. That is a broken system. That is something that I actually agree with. Now, he also says, that's why we need a national ID that travels with people. Well, look, I'm in favor of automatic voter registration. Everybody gets registered. That's it. No fuss. You make it easier to vote. Simple. Of course, they don't want that. Now, so since being registered in more than one state isn't illegal, then why is he out here making a big deal about it? I mean, especially how True the Vote found so many people registered in more than one state. Well, I have an idea. It might have to do with interstate crosscheck. Now, interstate crosscheck is the creation of Chris Kobach, who was incredibly racist. See, Kobach made the system that purges people registered to vote in more than one state. Oh, duplicate voter. Got to get rid of them both. Voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud. We actually need a voter ID system. But not only that, of course, when you purge them from the rolls, they can't vote. And it seems to be very selective in who it purges. For example, people with African American or Latino sounding names. So it is used as a piece of racist voter suppression. It is a voter suppression tool. And again, to touch on his hypocrisy, Phillips has also previously tweeted about the dangers of inactive voters being able to vote in U.S. elections. He says, quote, there's already law that compels states to remove inactive voters. Many don't. Well, that would include you. But when asked about being registered in multiple states, even as an inactive voter, again, he says, why do I know? Why would I know? Why would I care? Well, by your logic, you're a danger and you should be purged from the rolls. Now, again, he makes a good point about our election system being broken. I agree with that. Voter registration, automatic. That's what it should be. No voter IDs, just automatic voter registration. And why do I say that? Well, why can't I just go with the card? I mean, some people are like, well, it would just be easier if everybody got a voter ID card. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Well, there are some issues to getting that card. Travel issues, registration issues, because I would assume you would still have to register to get that card. And sometimes that's not easy for people to do. And we want to actually make voting as easy as possible for everyone. Okay? And as far as, but that voter ID card though, well, that'll make sure voter fraud doesn't happen. Well, voter fraud is already kind of an imaginary problem. I mean, yes, there are instances. In fact, there are statistics here on fraud show that the rate of in-person voter fraud is around 0.0000132%. So, how big of a problem is voter fraud? Universal registration. That would solve so many different problems. But unfortunately, they don't want to do that. What they want to do is that they want to purge people from the voter rolls that disagree with them, that might actually vote for Democrats. Now, of course, there are black people that vote Republican. There are Latinos that voted for Trump. But those same people, under these voter ID laws, would still be purged from the rolls. I mean, come on, man. That's what the whole purpose is. And you can trace it back to the godfather of the modern conservative movement, Paul Weyrich, talking about the Goo Goo syndrome. I bring it up every time I talk about voting rights because I think it's important, because it shows what their priorities actually are when it comes to voting. They don't want more people voting. They want less voting. Because when less people vote, they win because their positions are not popular. Not with the American people, because you break it down issue by issue, Americans are much more progressive on a lot of issues, like issues of the economy. For example, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all in favor of at least raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour. Are Republicans going to do that? Hell no. Issues of Social Security, Medicare, healthcare, tax cuts for the rich, and corporations, crony capitalism. Americans hate crony capitalism, but the Republicans continue to do it. And it's because they get elected by an increasingly smaller group of people, because they continue to restrict voting rights and to make it much harder to vote, purging the rolls and doing voter suppression and requiring photo voter IDs that are difficult to get for some people, for college students, for people who are elderly. Now, one more thing on Mr. Phillips. Now, apparently, more information has come out about him personally. It appears that he's got a bit of a checkered past. Now, according to The Guardian, he is an alleged tax dodger and owes the federal government over $100,000 in unpaid income taxes. Interesting. Now, The Guardian also notes that Phillips has had a colorful and lesser-known career in Mississippi and Texas state politics over the past few decades, in which he was accused of exploiting positions that he held in the administration of both states for his own personal financial gain. And there's a lot of details. I'd have to go through all of that whole thing in another show, because it's a huge read up, and I can put that read in that description of the video. So we'll put that there. But look, this is the guy who was Donald Trump's voter fraud expert. This is the guy that Trump trusts. This is a guy who doesn't pay his taxes, use government to enrich himself, and won't even share the data that he used to allege massive voter fraud. Now, there's fraud right here. All right. And his name is Gregg Phillips. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent, non-corporate media, go to our Patreon page and become a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation.